Tonight we're going to be talking about educational vouchers and how they might play a part in education in Athens. So, as some of you who like to keep your eye on what's happening down and under the down in the dome, this year there was Senate Bill 173 and also House Bill 68 that introduced a bill to enact an educational scholarship account. It did not move forward this year, but it is still part of this biannual bit of the welcome, Frank. We're just getting started. And so it's still on the table for next year and under consideration. Tonight we wanted to talk more about what the future efforts are to expand this type of educational voucher system, and how might these efforts by the Georgia Assembly to enact these scholarship accounts affect students here in Athens-Clarke County. So, Federation of Neighborhoods, for those of you who don't know, we are a nonpartisan group made up of neighborhood associations, other civic organizations in town, as well as individual members. And so we appreciate everyone who comes out to our events. If you are not a member of the Federation of Neighborhoods, please consider applying to become a member. It just costs you a little bit of money. And if you don't feel like membership is for you, we also have a tip jar. So, and we like to encourage our neighborhood associations. So if you have a neighborhood association and you don't know if they're a member of the Federation of Neighborhoods, let us know and we can follow up with them about getting their membership up to date. So tonight we're going to talk about vouchers. I'm going to give a quick introduction to our panelists and ask a couple of questions, and then I'll open it up to the floor. Would like to keep, I know there's probably a lot of things you would like to talk to these people about. But we're going to try to keep this conversation tonight more focused on this particular topic. And usually, as we always do, I will try to just do one question per person for starters. That way we can hear from as many voices as possible before I start going around for a double dip on question and answer. So tonight we have from Fighting District 47, Frank Ginn on the end, Senator Ginn. Next to him is Senator Bill Cowsert from he's the state senator for District 46. And then Greg Davis, who is a Clarke County School Board member. He represents District 1 here in Clarke County. And Dr. Desmond Means, Clarke County School District Superintendent. So welcome. We are sorry that Claire Scott, who is with the Clarke County School District, she's the Chief of Community Engagement and Strategic Partnerships, was supposed to be here tonight as well, but she had something come up and was unable to be here at the last moment. But she sends her regards and really wishes she could be here. I do recommend she said that she wrote a policy report last April 2018, that is up on the Georgia Budget and Policy Institute's website. So if you're interested to hear more about her point of view and thoughts on voucher systems, you can read more there. All right, I'm going to just start by having each of you maybe talk a little bit about this new take on voucher system for for Georgia, and then of course what maybe some of the advantages might be for students here, for the community in Clarke County, and maybe what some of the disadvantages might be. And I'm going to start with Dr. Means.
Great. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Without the microphone, good. I'll start with a story. As many of you may know, I'm from the state of Wisconsin. The state of Wisconsin is, in the eyes of many, from a policy perspective nationally, the ground zero for the voucher movement. In 1990 was the first legislative bill that went into action across our nation to give public dollars for voucher schools. The champion for that bill was a woman that I consider a close friend and mentor. Her name was Annette Polly Williams. And if you research the voucher movement in Wisconsin, you'll see that Annette Polly Williams was a state representative who an African American state representative who felt that public schools needed to do more, and that vouchers were probably the answer to that work. Polly passed away a few years ago, and prior to her passing away, she shared that one of her regrets was being a sponsor of the voucher bill. She felt that the voucher bill actually did not live up to what it promised to be. I've watched in my home state where vouchers have grown, and they've continued to grow what I believe to be out of control without a lot of oversight at the state level. They've grown out of control in terms of a lack of accountability, but more importantly, it has continued to take money away from public schools that need every dime to institute the type of support and change that we all want for our public schools. Every dime that goes toward a voucher system is a dime that's taken away from a child at House or at Timothy Road or at Barrow Elementary School, and that's just a reality. Our schools continue to be underfunded. Just last week at a board meeting, I was able to share with the Board of Education that while we earn money through the QBE, which is the funding formula, we still don't receive a dollar for dollar contribution for the money that we're investing. So for example, for every 5 social workers that we earn in the QBE formula, we only get, excuse me, let me say it a different way. We have 9 social workers in our budget. So we employ 9 social workers, but we only earn 5.17 social workers in the QBE formula. So in other words, we employ 9, but the state only gives us money for 5. That means the local taxpayer is paying the difference for what we believe is valuable and necessary for our kids. That gap will continue to grow in Clarke County if a voucher program is put in place. I'll say 2 last things and I'll turn it over to Mr. Davis. The first is that the voucher bill that was on the floor, I believe, is just a very aggressive next step. We shouldn't lose sight of the fact that there are already I would call baby voucher programs already in place in Georgia, where public dollars are already going to private schools right now. The bill that was on the floor this past legislative session would have opened the doors, would have blown the doors off of what is currently a very controlled program of vouchers in the state of Georgia. I'll conclude by saying this. There's nothing good, and I can tell you after seeing vouchers in place for 27 years, nothing good comes from a voucher program in a state. I've lived it, I've seen it. One of the exciting things for me coming to Georgia was that I was getting away from a flawed program in my home state of Wisconsin with vouchers. I would encourage any of you and any legislator to talk to their colleagues, your colleagues in the state of Wisconsin, where it's been a failed experiment. I would urge you to not allow that experiment to happen here in Georgia, but specifically here in Clarke County.
All right, Greg.
Okay, first off, I do want to extend my appreciation not only to the Federation of Neighborhoods for having this, but also to Bill and Frank for being here. I will say that, we as a legislative committee, we have a school board legislative committee, and both Frank and Bill have very faithfully met with us, typically after the session and also before the next session. And we don't always agree, but we do appreciate their willingness to always sit down with us and talk about matters of education. I really was kind of lost when this voucher bill came up. And I say that because I was trying to figure out where it came from. I did not see a whole lot of movement from below. I know there have been concerns about some of our schools. We have one in Clarke County now that has made it to the list of schools that need significant improvement. And we've got a state turnaround officer, and he's designated, or he or she is designated to work with us on that particular school. We've employed the University of Virginia that are well renowned for their ability to turn around schools. And so, that much I can get. I mean, we have schools that need improvement, and the state has expressed a concern, the legislature has expressed concern, and so that's something that we as a school board take very seriously as well, and have actually put things into place to make it those improvements that we all expect to happen in short order. But instead, what really, when I read the voucher bill, and I read a number of different versions of it, both the House and the Senate, and then the one that just came out of the Senate Education Committee, I was struck by the fact that it really didn't talk about the quality of education. And it was Leon Gallus who finally pieced it together for me in his column a couple of weeks ago in the flagpole, when he wrote that to the voucher proponents, it's only about reducing government's footprint in American life. Improving student achievement isn't a priority. And indeed, if you read the bill, the voucher bill, it says that this bill is not to be construed to imply that public schools do not provide a free and appropriate public education for students. So right from the get-go, it's like the voucher bill in the state of Georgia, as currently proposed, is a solution in search of a problem. And that really concerns me, because and Dr. Means talked about his experiences with Milwaukee. I've done a little bit, and I'm not a researcher by profession or by temperament, but looking at the voucher program in Indiana, they found substantial average achievement loss with students who had vouchers. The same in Ohio, the same in Louisiana, the same in Washington, D.C., the same in Milwaukee. In Alabama and Florida, it's kind of a wash. Some students, in terms of public education versus students who are on the voucher. But you got to the point where Florida no longer even reports out those comparative scores between students who are on the voucher attending private schools and those who are in public schools. So then we reported it. And as Dr. Means said, we already have the Georgia Special Needs Scholarship Program that's been in place since 2007. There are about 4,600 students who participate. And that's something that has existed, but again, when this bill was proposed, it was like that bill wasn't even in place, as a program, and already passed in 2007. We also have the Georgia Qualified Education Expense Tax Credit, where people can receive a dollar tax decrease for every dollar that they put towards private education on behalf of someone else. So it's not like we're not stepping into the waters here of state money for private education. But the point is that this was a massive, originally they were talking about 5% of the budget for education that the state contributes every year. Now they put it in terms idea of pulling them out of public education and into private education. And my only conclusion to this right now is why? Why are we doing this? What are we trying to achieve? You know, are we doing it to improve education? That's not what the bill talks about. Why are we doing it? You know, and so I will leave it to smarter minds than myself to kind of answer that. But I don't understand why we're doing it.
Well, that's a great lead-in, Bill. Smarter minds.
Hi, Bill Cowsert. I know many of you in the room. I think that those of you who know me know I've been a very strong advocate of public education throughout my legislative career. I'm a product of the public schools in Macon, Georgia. And I tell the story often that my mother still teaches. She's 85, still substitute teaches in the public school system in Macon. And I would never vote for anything that I felt harmed or undermined our public education system. That's the basis, really one of the functions of government that we're required to do and we should be educating our children. And thanks for the civil discourse. I will say, let's point out, you're putting signs against Frank and I, we are here. You've got 2 Republican senators that agreed to come speak with you about issues that are important to us, and so please be respectful to us as well.
We're being respectful.
Excuse me?
We're being more respectful than you were being toward us as women. Thank you.
I thought that's about all I had to say.
Frank, tell us a little bit more about why you were supportive of this bill and what good you might think come out of it.
Could we have you finish your thought, please, sir? I'm interested in hearing what your position is.
Okay. I thought it might be interesting for you to, how many students we got in this school?
14,000.
We got 14,000 students here. So we are talking, you know, that would be, what's 1% of that, 140? We're talking about 1,400 to 10%. You're doing private school math on this bill, at its full implementation, would cover 2.5% of the children in the public school system. First year would be 1/2 of 1%, so you're talking about 70 kids if it was max implementation. And you're talking about the state portion of the funding only, which is roughly $5,500 per kid. That would be set up in a scholarship for them to give them the choice if they wanted to use that to apply towards a private school education. There are only 3 types of students that would be eligible. Number 1 would be somebody below 150% of the poverty line. So poor children that obviously could not afford to go to private school without this assistance. Number 2, special needs kids, disabled children that are on an IEP. Those of you who are familiar with that. So looking for a better environment for them, for their learning. Number 3, kids that have been documented to have been bullied in their schools. It's a very small universe we're looking for. This isn't for rich kids. It's not for kids already in private school. You would have to be in the public school for at least a consecutive year before you could even apply for this. And it would never be more than that percentage from a school district. So it's such a small number of kids that it's not going to impact your teacher-student ratios, those type of things. So you need to understand the very narrow scope of this program before you formulate an opinion on it. The other thing, this they refer to as the Cowsert Amendment, is I said I will never support this unless the public schools are 100% funded under our QBE formula. Because I fought like a maniac for about a decade to get us back to that full funding after our Great Recession. And the last 2 years, we have fully funded the QBE program. So to me, it seems like a pretty good trade. Year 1, you lose 1/2 of 1% of your funding at the max. You still keep your local funding. You know, to guarantee me 99.5% of QBE funding when I have been desperately seeking it for the last decade, isn't such a bad trade-off when this takes care of these children that have no other options, that are not in an environment that's conducive to them. And their parents want to give them a better opportunity and they can't afford to do it. So that's parts of this story that are not catching the press. And the bill in its final format said if at any time the state quit fully funding the QBE formula, no further kids will be accepted in this program. I think that's a pretty enticing offer. And this is not for the little rich kids. It's not for the kids already in private schools. It's for people that don't have another option because they financially cannot afford to do it. And they are trapped basically in the school of their zip code, so to speak, of their school district, to give them choice. So that's the idea behind this bill. With those provisos, I agreed that I would support this bill with those parameters. There was not enough support in the state Senate to pass the bill. And we said there was a House bill, as Greg pointed out. That was a completely different bill that was used as a vehicle in the Senate. So nobody knows how the House of Representatives will vote on this. So, I mean, this is a nice discussion to explore whether this idea has merit or not, but it is a little bit premature because there does not appear to be political will to pass this at this point. I'll pass it to you, Frank.
Thank you. It's great to be with you tonight, first off, but I want to invite one of my friends to come up here from the back of the room. Mr. Johnson, if you would, I noticed there's a chair over here with me. And I'm going to ask you to come up here to the front, because some of y'all, if you pay attention, come on there, you got to come down and talk with me. Said the Athens owned there in Johnson. I think you named your company's Paramount Consulting.
It's true, Senator.
Yes. Said in case y'all don't know, said our very own Athens finest, said good to have you here there.
This wasn't a plan at all.
But you know, one of the things Larry grew up here in Athens, and his mom, he came over to have dinner with your mom, spend the night. Said and I asked him, I said, well, Larry, come on, if you haven't watched the Georgia game, the Sunday mornings, I keep over every Sunday. Said Darren is truly a celebrity, and we're glad to have you here tonight. Said
I'm going to sit that down and see that.
no, you got to stay up here with us, because when we talk politics, you're the guy. It is a little warm up here. Now, you know, and I don't know, I guess if I had to guess, said when I look at Greg and me, said I'm going to think that there's some differences in our philosophy, but one of the things that I'm sure there's differences in is our shoe size. If you look at, said for me, I wear size 12. What size shoe do you wear?
6.5.
6.5. So I was just guessing from looking at his shoes, said there's a different size. One of the things that I can tell you, for me, why it was important to look at this piece of legislation from twofold. First off, I agree 100% with Senator Cowsert. Said I don't want to do anything that hurts our public school system. And so, is Jared Beebe here by chance? I have never met him in person. Said but he's the president of the Clarke County School Board. Said we talked several times the week leading up to the vote. We talked the day of the vote. We emailed back and forth over the weekend. For me, I'm a nuts and bolts kind of guy. Said I'm an engineer, and for me, I looked at the legislation and I asked him. I said, "All right, Jared," said if you can show me mathematically where this does anything to harm a child that's in the Clarke County School District, I want to know." Said basically what's happening is we're talking about the state portion of funding that follows a child in Georgia. Said roughly on average it's about $5,500. One of the things that we did in the legislation was we made sure that, okay, let's put that down to the county level. So, you know, if a child leaves from Clarke County and goes to Oconee County or goes to another county in the state, said that state money is going to follow that child. If the child has been in the public school system and they meet those special requirements in order to enroll in this program, then for me, it's one of those things that I look at and I said, all right, the public schools do a great job educating. And fortunately, unfortunately, they have to take every kid in their district. And for me, so that's a tough nut to crack. Is it the right size shoe for every kid in the district? I don't know. Said they, but you know, we have special needs kids that are eligible for this. Said we've got kids that are different from you and I. Said I'm a product of public schools. My wife taught in the public schools. For me, I looked at this legislation and I challenged all of the administrators that I talked to and the school board members that I talked to. I said, if you can show me where it harms the economics side for the school district, then let me know. Said otherwise, I'm looking at it as a choice for the kids that are in school to do something that fits them a little bit more better. As they say in proper English.
May I?
Yes.
Just a couple of things. I just want to thank everyone for being here. Well, and Bill and Frank, I think Greg said it well. Having this discussion in public is good and healthy. I also want to recognize another board member here, Dr. Francis Berry, who's on our Board of Education. Thank you, Dr. Berry, for being here. I would just say a couple of things. The public school is that one athletic/shoe store that can fit the needs of all children. And so we don't need to give money to a private school to fit the needs of children. If you just fully fund the public schools, we can address the needs of all those kids.
Well, we've done that the last 2 years. And just gave a $5,000 raise to teachers in 2 increments, $3,000 this year. So that's being done.
But respectfully, I would say it's not. So for example, in our funding formula, we receive funding from the state for 938 teachers, but we actually employ 1,008 teachers because we want to have low class sizes. And so we put it on the backs of the local taxpayers. We spend $8.6 million in transportation. The state only provides us a little over $1 million. So I would agree with you. When the state fully funds public schools in Clarke County, then we should talk about vouchers, but we're not even close. We did an analysis and we are paying locally about $20 million in extra funds that the state isn't paying for. Unfortunately, in our community, we've had a lot of conversations about the need for more social workers and counselors, and we need it. I'm the first to admit that. But we don't receive enough money from the state government. Yes, you haven't imposed more cuts the last 2 years, but you haven't. There's a cost of living issue that we have not addressed that occurred during all those years of austerity cuts. And so I think that's a problem. The last thing I would just cite is this. And if I hadn't come from a state where vouchers was front and center from a political standpoint, I guess I would take a different opinion. But I would just warn all of us, including legislators, that everything you just heard is what I heard 27 years ago. I heard, well, it's not going to be that many kids. Well, in the state of Wisconsin now, when you combine all the children in the voucher program, if you've made it a school district, it will be one of the largest school districts in the state of Wisconsin. When you talk about the fact that this isn't going to hurt school districts, it will hurt us significantly. If the Senate bill that was on the floor would have passed, it would have hurt Clarke County this year. And I guess the last thing I would say, I want to go back to my mentor and good friend, Annette Pollock-Williams, who was a champion as a legislator, at least at a minimum, when the legislature in Wisconsin 29 years ago tried to implement vouchers. At least they worked with an African-American legislator to say this was for poor kids, that this was for the underserved children. It wasn't even cloaked or even hidden in a way of trying to help the underprivileged in the state of Georgia. If you follow the money nationally around the voucher movement, there is a corporate machinery behind this to, as Greg said, to lessen the footprint of public schools, which is the true laboratory for making kids great, all kids, regardless of their zip code. So what I would say respectfully is if you fully fund us,
So don't give us $1 million for transportation, give us the 8.6. Then let's have the conversation about vouchers. But until then, you're not even eligible to talk about giving money to private schools because you haven't fully funded public schools.
Dr. Means, you cleverly mixed the state funding with local funding. And that's one of the strengths of our system. We have local control in local governments, local school boards, if they elect to have more than the state allocated number of teachers to lower their class sizes, or to have more counselors, or folks are free to do that. And so you're asking the state to fund the Clarke County experiment, which you're spending, what is it now, $11,000, $12,000 per child to educate these children. And right next door, Oconee County is spending about $8,500. Same with Walton County. They have not put as great of an emphasis as you have on class size, and I applaud you for that, but to expect the state to fund fully what any community desires is unrealistic, and that seems like what you're saying. And if I'm doing my math right, if the full 70 students elected to take this student scholarship, the $5,500 each, it's going to cost your school district $350,000 for this year. Out of $100-something billion budget you have, that is not going to cripple the school system in any way, and it gives these children a choice themselves. If maybe they don't like or appreciate the education they're able to get in their district, it almost begins to feel very desperate and defensive of the school district to say, we're the only ones that can do it right. Don't give those poor kids, those bullied kids, those disabled kids an opportunity to select other education. It's going to crumble our school system, which the facts, I mean, the math doesn't work there at $350,000. And that also reduces your cost. Now what Frank just said was you would lose that state funding if they chose to move voluntarily to go to another public school.
One of the things that for me, and you know, it's kind of interesting, I've never, my knowledge, been in Wisconsin.
It's a beautiful state.
I do like cheese.
Yes.
But I just, while I was sitting here, I like to, okay, let's see where Wisconsin is in the rankings from U.S. News World Report, on education across the country. Wisconsin is number 18. Georgia is number 31. I'm so proud we're not 49th like we were when I started in the legislature. Said we are making progress. We're doing a lot of things. Said I would say, and once again, said for me, it's a numbers game. Said I understand you're concerned, and I am greatly concerned about the old adage of the nose of the camel under the tent. Said for me, I can only vote for what we have today. And when I looked at this piece of legislation, I looked at it and I said, okay, somebody in the education arena, help me see where the math is going to hurt any of our public schools. I talked to school administrators in 3 counties. I talked to your president of your school board probably 4 times and emailed him a couple times. Said and when they can't tell me that any way that it's going to hurt the public school system financially, said and it gives options to children in Clarke County, I don't see that as a problem. I looked at it and said, you know, for me, hey, I got to worry about where we go down the road. But at this particular piece of legislation, it gave options to children in the state of Georgia that may or may not be best served in the public arena.
Greg, jump in.
Yeah, I got to jump in here. I mean, again, I want to get back to what is in the best interest of children. You know, we talk about, parent choice, which I know is part of this idea of the footprint of that public education has in this country. But the state legislature and the governors, for decades after decades after decades, have put money into a public education system where we have spent billions of dollars training very high teachers, in terms of their of their ability to teach. But what we're talking about is that we're talking about replacing a state mandated curriculum, which has been based on research. When we're talking about replacing that with, according to the piece of this law, students who are on the voucher will be taught reading, grammar, mathematics, social studies, and science. That's all it says in these 10 pages does it say about curriculum. It doesn't specify what curriculum we're talking about. It just talks about they will be taught reading, grammar, mathematics, social studies, and science. The whole process that the state has used to develop its curriculum, which is research-based, is just put off to the side. Teacher certification, same example. We spent billions of dollars training a very educated workforce, both in teaching methods and in subject content. What the bill says is that you can become a teacher in a private school if you have 3 years experience in education. It doesn't say you have to be a certified teacher. It doesn't say you have to have attended education courses. You just have to have been a paraprofessional or somebody in special education, somebody in education. It talks about replacing in terms of how we're going to measure student progress. Because again, it's all about the kids. At the end of the day, what do the kids learn? Okay. Well, in the state of Georgia, public schools, we have to use the Georgia Alternative Assessment. We use the milestones. We use the end of course testing in 8 subject areas. So these are again state tests that the state legislature has financed at tens of millions of dollars. This very effective testing mechanism to see if our students are learning. Well, what this law does is throws that all out the window and says that a private school who accepts voucher students, quote, they select a nationally known reference test that measures student academic programs in math and language arts. Okay, that's all it says in the law about how students are going to be held accountable, or how schools will be accountable for the education of students. That's all it says. And then you say, well, at least once these students who are on the voucher program go to these private schools, at least we'll see how well the private schools do. Okay? Fair enough, right? No, that's not what this law says. What this law says is that all those students, their academic performance will be grouped together. So if there are 7,000 students, let's say, on the voucher program, coming from, let's say, 400 schools, all that is grouped together. The law says specifically that these schools will not be reported out individually. So we never know if ABC school has failed in educating students with voucher money, whereas CDF school has been greatly successful. The state legislature hasn't even write that into the bill. Again, why? Because this bill, this 10 pages, is not an education bill. It's not to improve education. It's there to have another outlet where tax dollars go to support public-private colleges. And I want to end on this note. We talk about special education. We have the Georgia Special Needs Scholarship Program. Is that not working?
That's one of the groups that's eligible in this program.
Okay, but
there are others.
But is this working? Is this scholarship program, Georgia Special Needs Scholarship Program, with 664 students, is it doing what the state legislature wanted?
Do you think so?
Huh? I'm asking you because I don't see the need for this because we can educate our special education students. But I'm asking y'all as a proponent, if this is working, you've already got this in place.
We get fantastic feedback.
Okay, so why duplicate it?
Because it's so fantastic results.
So, man, just a couple of things, Frank. I would advise you to go to Wisconsin in the summer, not in the winter.
That's a good idea. I'm with you.
Before the voucher movement started, Wisconsin was traditionally in the top 5 of states performing nationally, year in and year out. So candidly, as a native of Wisconsin, to hear that we're 18 is embarrassing. But it's embarrassing because the voucher movement took place and took hold. We talked about the $350,000. That would give us $350,000 for Clarke County would allow us to hire 5 more social workers. So 5 more social workers would allow us to stop bullying. 5 more social workers would allow us to talk to families with special needs to make sure that those kids are being addressed. 5 more social workers would allow us to address kids who are in poverty in a better situation. It would allow us to hire 5 more counselors. If we had 5 more counselors, we would have a student to counselor ratio of somewhere around 280 to 1, which we don't have right now. So every dollar does count for us. I am appreciative of the fact that this community allows us to have a millage rate of 20 mils. We're one of about 18 school districts in the state of Georgia that has a millage rate that high. If we did not, we would be in more trouble. I agree with my board member here. If the legislature was serious about education and the education bill, there would be some type of bill that would talk about giving school districts like Clarke County more money because of the level of poverty that we deal with. Or giving us more money because through the funding formula because of some of the issues that our teachers are addressing year in and year out. Instead, you're pivoting and you're giving money to private schools. It would be laughable if I hadn't seen this in my career for 20 plus years. This would be laughable. What you have in front of you, and Claire Suggs, who worked at the policy level for years in Atlanta, Claire and I talked. This is nothing more than a national bill that's part of a national movement across our nation to decimate public education. That's all this is. I understand that, and again, it would be laughable if I hadn't seen it. The same language you're using now, say in terms of, well, it's only a few kids. In 1990, they said it was only be a few kids in Wisconsin. It's over 50,000 kids now, and it's growing, and it continues to grow. I am significantly concerned that our legislators would even entertain this bill, knowing the challenges that we have in Clarke County. We have a lot of things that we need to work on, and we have to try to get better at as a school district. Mr. Davis reminds me constantly. But if we could, again, I'll make it simple for you as legislators. We pay $8.6 million for transportation. We only receive $1 million from the state. Even if you close that gap, that would be a start. But instead of you having conversations about closing those gaps, you're making a pivot and you're talking about giving money to children to go to private schools. Help us educate those kids in our schools right now where they want to go, where they want to stay and belong.
So I have the feeling that tonight was going to be one of those nights where I didn't have to worry about having a big long list of questions because the conversation would just happen. And so I appreciate hearing from all of you. I did want to quickly follow up with something that the bill that you mentioned about that you felt like maybe this wasn't going anywhere. Do you think that there is a lot of that there's, where do you see, especially coming from your position in the Senate, in the state Senate, where do you see, are you seeing pushback from various different areas, maybe some of the things we've already heard here tonight, or?
Yeah, and this is healthy. Greg and I and Mom have great respect for each other. These guys have way more expertise than I do.
Yes.
I recognize that, and this is healthy for you to point out things that are flaws in this bill, so that if it does come back again, we can take a look at that and perfection. Those type of productive suggestions, constructive criticism, so to speak, are very well received by me. I don't want that to be misunderstood. that I probably sound a little more protective or defensive of this bill than I feel. It has never had a majority support in the state Senate. And this is not the first go-around. Every year I've been in office, some version or semblance of school choice has come forward. And nothing has ever passed to that effect. And I don't know where the public sentiment is. I will tell you what the polling shows is that particularly minority parents are desperate for some options, for some choice, when they have unpleasant educational experiences. And this may be the solution, this may be a part of one, this may just be a great conversation to have, is what can we do better so those parents are not looking for other opportunities. Because you're basically saying, hey, we got it figured out. How could anybody be dumb enough to not want to take this public education that our geniuses have come up with? And that's not the real world. There are people that are unhappy. Maybe it's because their child is being bullied. Maybe it's because they have special needs that aren't being met. Maybe it's because they see other people that are better off economically taking advantage of parochial schools or other private education that they wish they had a chance to do. And so it's not an all us against them. It's a parents trying to do what they think's best, and they may not agree with you that you have solved the riddle by having the one be-all end-all system. It's not adversarial, and you raised some wonderful points, and I know where everybody here's point is on this issue.
I mean, I don't think we have the solution, but what we do have, we have a democratically developed over a period of this country's history. We have developed public education as an institution, as the great equalizer, and it has always been pretty. I mean, you in my lifetime, we went from extreme segregation to an integrated situation, and that created problems. But the fact is that we have a public arena to do this in the state legislature. You know, we are partners in this. But you know, what I felt like with this voucher bill is kind of like you're taking some of your marbles and going home, and you're leaving the discussion of like what Dr. Mead said. Let's go to the table and let's see what do we need to have the kind of schools that the state legislature expects to have. You know, let's have the dialogue between superintendents, teachers, legislators, the governor, and that kind of thing.
I'm going to take a few questions from the audience. I knew there'd be questions. I'd like to remind you to keep it on point relative to education vouchers and the possibilities therein. Also, please make form your question in the form of a question. So I'll expect there to be a question mark at the end of your sentence. Just good grammar police here, you know, working on that. So I'm gonna start with first, because I think, you know, go Warriors.
Yeah, we have a basketball game to get to tonight. I'm really happy everybody showed up. It's a lot bigger crowd. I've learned a ton. Raised Republican myself. Went to college. Read some stuff on sociology. Started understanding a little bit more about how things are really structured. Knowing Bill a long time. Knowing he's a lawyer. Knowing Frank, and certainly Ron and Greg and I know each other in the local situation. We never always agree. So it's been really interesting to hear the agreement with them and learn a lot from you, Bill, which I listened more. I guess I probably learned from you more. I did not know how much there was a difference between the House and the Senate version. I was following along the best I could on Public Education Matters Georgia. If anybody followed along, they're great. They are a bunch of Grady High School parents in Atlanta who've been lobbying down there at the Capitol. I'm sure Bill and Frank both know. Labs lawyers who are parents who lobby on behalf, not of corporations or privatizers, they were lobbying on behalf of school kids and parents. Public Education Matters Georgia, they were sending out action. I didn't know all that stuff, and I'm really glad to know it. But I do remember something. I know you remember from law school too. I think you were really young when you were there later. But bar the entering wedge, that is a fairly common maxim. Camel of intent. It's only 70. You very cleverly mentioned the lowest amount, and you also mentioned how little the county spends with Clarke. but you know how much more of a special needs situation we have. The poverty rate being approximately tenfold in this county versus the one next door. The fact that it generally costs more to educate and to get the supports that the poorer children need in relative terms, and I mean that in an disparaging way. I'm a product of a lot of experience of 26 years as a parent of how I both my kids. It's actually only about 23 so far of years. And one of them was a lot of our department. I did a little research. I'm like Greg. I'm not all that research mentality. I was Greg. You're more than you say you are. You read the bill, you see what's in it, you see what's not in it, and you hear talking points, and you hear all about propensity. So I'm getting my question with you, I promise.
Fresh mark.
So, school, in 4 years that I looked into fairly recently, with the latest version of the Georgia millstones, which start very soon, the millstones test that is what is required, and it's certainly not required in the private schools. Not the state scholarship private schools that we already have $100 million worth of. Nobody had mentioned here tonight. The NEO vouchers, the baby vouchers, the non did mention. But you mentioned the state, the special needs scholarship. There's also the SSO. There's no testing attached to that at all. Zero. We're the only state in the country that does not test the kids once they escape the horrible public schools. They get to go to the private schools, which we know that means bunches of kids from housing projects are enrolling in Westminster and Athens-Clarke. We know that. But we don't ever even test them. So Clarke Middle during these 4 years that I looked into was a C school, a D school, a B school, and a C school. 4 years, 4 grades, 2 over C, 1 was D, 1 was D. So that's the backdrop that our kids are being tested on. That doesn't make any sense to me either. I wish our kids weren't being tested that much every single year, but that's what they are. So I want to know, given that's the backdrop, I understand your concern, and I think it's heartfelt. I believe you about your mom, I believe you about your own background, and I know you don't want people in public school, but why, if this bill is such a good idea, whether it's the House version or the Senate version, did you have so much trouble convincing Republicans that it's a good idea? You had the governor for it, you had the leadership for it, you clearly had a lot of lobbying forces behind passing the voucher bill in Georgia. It's very important nationally. You have voucher bills in all the states. You mentioned a couple of them in Florida. There's vouchers everywhere. Why did Republicans not support it? Lindsay Tippins, people who've been on school boards, people who really care about public schools. Question mark. Why did you have such a hard time?
I heard a question mark.
Republicans to pass this bill. Thank you very much. And I really appreciate it.
He's just jealous we didn't put him on the panel. Don't you Curtis did ask a question? Thank you, Curtis.
I think Greg pointed out a lot of those reasons. This is an evolving concept and ideas, and Greg has pointed out a number of flaws that people don't agree. I think everybody, Republican or Democrat, I've always said this is not really a partisan issue. It certainly shouldn't be. Totally, are scared to do anything to undermine public education. Good. I think from a political standpoint, the Republican Party has stepped up its game and fully funded QBE for 2 years in a row, given the greatest teacher pay raise ever, percentage-wise, and then to do something at the same time that might be viewed or perceived, obviously, by the majority of this crowd as undermining publication. Education is counterproductive in that mode. So I think there are a lot of people saying, wait a second, we are now showing that we're leading as a Republican Party on public education, and why at the same time do something that is perceived by the education bureaucracy anyway as saying you're attacking us. And you're part of the bureaucracy. Parents. I'm just saying the people on this panel, you guys don't remember the superintendent that are being very defensive of this. So I think that answers part of your question, whether a lot of people say, we're not going to vote for that, because we respect these people that serve on the school boards and public teachers. They are in the highest esteem, and when we hear from those people saying this is a bad idea, we pay attention. But it didn't affect your vote. It didn't matter because of the total package, but it affected the vote of the majority of the state senate.
We got another question.
Yes.
I had my hand up before him.
If there were hands raised long before you put yours up. I'm going with that one.
Yeah. Senators, are either of you on the education committee?
I'm not.
Okay. Well, given what, follow-up to this question, what Mr. Davis has said and Dr. Means, Mr. Davis pointing out a lot of flaws of accountability, dysfunction, which both of you gentlemen recognize lost your colleagues on support, and our sort of expert and champion for education, Dr. Means, saying this is a bad deal. Would you both consider withdrawing? I understand, Senator Cowsert, that you're a co-sponsor to this bill. Is that correct?
I don't recall co-sponsoring this. This one that we're discussing started as a House bill, so I would have been in a position to sponsor that.
Okay, but you said you wound up supporting it.
I wound up supporting it in its final version, which included the trigger that you had to fully fund education before it would go into effect.
Yes, we've heard that point, but you haven't really responded to all the points that Mr. Davis is making or Dr. Means. So would you consider, or I invite you to consider, withdrawing your support for this bill, because it has a lot of flaws, as well as Senator Ginn.
We'll wait to see the final form. If it comes back, and it may not come out of committee next year, it'll be remanded to committee, recommitted, what we call that, and we'll see if it has legs, so to speak, was the phrase we used, to have enough support to get out of committee again, and then in what form it is. And surely I consider everything anybody in this room has said, and all the emails I get and all the phone calls, critiques of this, both for it or against it, before we make a final decision.
For me, I reached back out to those educators that I knew that had contacted me before we voted on this. And I went back to this question, how does this hurt your school system? And I never got anybody that was in education, whether they were a school board member, whether they were a superintendent or whatever on that side of it, to tell me how it hurt the public schools.
We have a superintendent of schools.
Before we voted on this bill, said after we voted on this bill, said the education community engaged a lot more on this particular subject. And for the most part, the biggest offense that I heard from the education community was about what are you doing to verify the testing or the quality of what's going on. And that's really one of those things that, to me, I don't have an answer for what it is, and that's one of the things, if the bill is ever going to get brought up again, we need to make sure that, okay, hey, what do we have to make sure that those students are getting an adequate education? And that's what we're constitutionally charged with in Georgia, is to provide every Georgia youngster adequate education.
Yes.
I'm opposed to your I'm reading about how this is, like, to Dr. Means' point, these sorts of bills are part of a nationwide effort. And it seems to be right out of the flavor of the ballot, honestly. With the reading and the research that I've been doing on it. And, the whole, well, this is only this many kids right now, that's an incremental approach to perpetuating defunding, right? Like increasing defunding over years, right? This has happened in Wisconsin. This is nothing new. It's being done in other states across the nation, which is why people like myself and other people who care about public school students in our communities are concerned about this, the first domino in a series that's going to increasingly defund and privatize, use public dollars to basically increase the profits of private entities, and in no way helping our young people, kids that I serve every day. So I guess my question would be, one question I guess would be, do you know that this bill is not a product of that outline, or that, like, these templates that we provide across the nation? Do you know that for a fact it's not, or do you just say?
You're the first person who's ever said that I know. Now, I know there is a national movement for school choice. Betty DeVos, or how she pronounce her name, has been a big. She come out of Wisconsin.
Other side of the lake.
It's up to Northern State. But I mean, this is a debate that's taking place nationwide. We're not aware of this being anybody's playbook or any specific template for this type of bill. In fact, there have been variants of this each year for the last 10 years, and they're greatly different from each other, so I don't see it being just a cookie cutter type thing. This one is more enormously during this legislative session.
And so, like I was saying earlier, gentlemen, that you hadn't heard anybody express to you in public schools how this would hurt public schools. And I guess my question would be, how does this not hurt public schools? Like if we're already in an underfunded system, and I get QBE, fully funded for QBE that data. But how does this not hurt public schools when you're taking away funding from an already starved system? That's my question to you.
When you look at mathematics, the students, across the state, we put so much money in for every student in the state. So if the student disappears, the money's just following that student. So what it doesn't do is it doesn't, you said you had 14,000 students, Dr. Mead. So what we've done is okay, we got now 13,999 students. Said we didn't take a dime of any local money, any money there. So do you change the millage rate in the county? No. So what happens to the math for the system is you have more money to spend on less students. So when those students are pulled out of your system, so and wherever they go, if they go to another county or they go to a special needs school or private school or whatever the case is, so you still have in the grand scheme of things, you have more money per student left, and that's why it will help mathematically your system. And that's why I challenge all of the educators that I talked to before I voted on the bill. Tell me where we're hurting the school system.
So Jesse, just quickly, at least in Wisconsin in 1990, the governor at the time was a gentleman who eventually became the Secretary of Health and Human Services by the name of Tommy Thompson. At least Tommy Thompson said, look, if we're going to introduce vouchers, we're going to fund public education 2/3. And so all the costs of public education, the state will cover it by 2/3. The final third is at the local level. So when I continue to hear, so respect, the state is not funding, and you're not fully funding the QBE. That's just not happening. If we're paying $8.6 million for transportation, and you give us $1 million, to me, that's not fully, that's not, if that's your definition of fully funding it, then we're doing some bad man.
And
so
what I would have is, why does Clarke County, the smallest geographic county in the state, have such high transportation costs? I don't know the answer to that. You're getting paid the same on a per student basis as all the other school districts.
Well, Bill, what I would respectfully share with you is that every school district in the state of Georgia is dealing with a gap with transportation costs. And so all I would just suggest, at least in my experience 29 years ago, at least the government said, we're going to make a commitment to funding education at a certain level. That hasn't even happened yet. And I guess the last thing I would say, I'll go back to what I said earlier, it would be appreciative if the legislature talked about helping districts like ours that's dealing with a lot of challenges from a funding perspective instead of making a pivot and giving public dollars to private schools. To me, so Frank, with all due respect, that's the heart, that's where you hurt us. That every dollar does count. $350,000 represents 5 social workers, or represents 5 counselors that we could hire if you weren't taking it from us and giving it to a private school.
Yeah. If you added 140 more students, or what did you say, 70 students? What was the number? Okay, so you add that many more students, you've got to have that much more staff, you've got to have that much more transportation costs. There's a lot of things that come in there. So for me, Cindy, when you look at, and I'll be the first to tell you, we hear from a lot of school systems the lack of funding on that particular issue on transportation for school kids. Cindy, one of the things that much proportional share is picked up by the local district than it is by the state on that particular side of things. But for me, this is where there's a lot more than just busing the kids to school that you spend money on. So What's your entire budget for the school system?
161 million.
Okay, and you're telling me that you spend $8 million to the, on the transportation side of things. You spend a lot more money on some other things than you do transportation.
Well, there's a gap. Where you're funding us at 938 teachers, we employ 1,008. We have 182 paraprofessionals in the organization. The QBE funds 0. I mean, so when I talk to classroom teachers, you want to talk about pressure teachers are dealing with. When I talk to first grade teachers, they will say, "What happened to my aide that used to be in my classroom?" I don't know when, and I invite you to come to a first grade or kindergarten classroom. It's hard to have a first grader or a second grader without a para in that classroom. We've lost those paras. The QBE funding formula doesn't give us funds for that type of support. Again, if you want to help, to Greg's point, I think he made an excellent point. If you really want to help public education, let's have a conversation about how you can support. How I define fully funding means if we're employing 1,008 teachers, that there's a funding element of it that says you're giving us money for 1,008 teachers. And if you're not going to do it at the state level, at least tell us at what percentage are you going to fund it. But it can't be, well, we feel comfortable with giving you money now, so we're not going to give you austerity cuts. I wouldn't say that you're fully funding us. I would say you just haven't implemented austerity cuts for the last 2 years. That's nuance and semantics. That's what you're doing right now from a funding perspective.
Dumont, 17 years ago, the current college seniors were in kindergarten. The state funded 2/3 of our state schools, and the local government picked up 1/3. That was 3 governors ago. The state now funds about 1/3, and the local governments pick up 2/3. That's where your teachers, your parapros, and your bus drivers. That's the fact. Whether Bill and Frank want to spin it some way, the fact is it's flip-flopped from 2/3, 1/3 to 1/3, 2/3.
So I have a question kind of following up with all of this, which is how does it work right now with the current special needs voucher system that's been in place since 2007? Are those students, can they go to schools outside of Clarke County? Like is my tax dollars funding these students to go to schools elsewhere? Or is this more limited to, I mean, what's the geographic limitations on some of this? And how does that relate to how maybe this bill and how that's envisioned and being used? Or how is that done elsewhere in the country? Nobody know? I don't know.
I don't know. What I do know is that in Clarke County, we have a large number of special needs children that have a vast array of needs.
Sure.
And there were, from my understanding, there were 2 students that we cannot provide an appropriate education to. I mean, we've got classrooms that have as many staff people as more students because of the disability. And so we have worked very, very hard to. We have a very capable special education staff now, to address the needs of every single student. Can a parent become upset because they feel like, I know that there are special ed coordinators that they will come across a parent who says, my child needs to have someone with them all day long, one-to-one, and the special ed department says the need is not there, not that high. And so there are parents who can get very upset with the special ed department, but they're going by the law, by federal law that says who we provide services to. And I feel like that, there are maybe a handful of parents who study autism, and actually I met one of our special education coordinators who got into education because her kid had autism. And so she became an expert in autism before she even went to school to become a teacher of special education. So we've got parents in there who are just as knowledgeable. But by and large, we have built up an institution of education that Do we always know best? No. But the fact is that we go by we're data driven. We don't go on what feels right. We have to go by what's provable. We have to use research. We can't just pull out one article and say, well, this looks good about how to teach kids reading. I think I might try that for a couple of years and see if my kid learns any better. We can't just pull things like that off.
And you're accountable.
You're accountable. And if you want to find out what Athens Elementary School is doing, you can go on the website right now. You can find out the attendance, the discipline, the academic performance, the teachers we've got there. You can find everything in the world you want to do about Athens. You won't be able to do that in this voucher bill where that money is going.
Yes.
Yeah, I had questions on the other end of this. I've heard some numbers sort of tossed around. I guess the state is supporting students to the tune of about $5,000 a student. And County's backing of students totals, I guess, 8,000. County's totals 10,000. So there's a $3,000 to $5,000 makeup that has to happen. What middle class family has that kind of money?
That's
Make that up, that difference. Who's making?
Oh, I see what you're saying. You're estimating the cost of a private school would be 10,000, is that what you said?
No, I'm saying if it were, those are the only figures that I've heard. I don't know what the private schools cost. They probably cost much more than that. But so, what kind of family has the money to do this that you're talking about?
I think
certainly not a poor family.
That is a concern I have as well. What we're told in this debate is that a lot of these schools will give scholarships and financial aid that can help make up the difference. Y'all mentioned this.
I would do that same thing with them if I were them, because I think that once you get your mouth around that government tip, you're going to make it bigger and bigger.
And it might be that people don't elect this option if the amount of money offered would be sufficient to provide the educational opportunities for them. Great point.
Do you think that the private education lobby, these kinds of schools and everything will become bigger than the NRA? Years?
I don't know.
I think so.
Thanks, sir.
You bet.
Okay, we're winding down here.
This one, you got about 3 seconds. Head back here, what's that?
A woman, please call on a woman.
And yet she persisted.
Thank you. Thank you for coming here. I appreciate it. All of you. I know this is hard, and I know you could be with your families, and I do appreciate you being here. I have heard Dr. Means and Mr. Davis cite experiences with this situation in research. Do you have any research that says that it's a success? Not just calling local educators and school board. You have research, hard evidence that this would be beneficial for us in the state of Georgia.
I do not, but I will tell you this, and one of the things that for me, I know there's an awful lot of parents that want to take their kids home and do homeschooling. Said, I don't know how beneficial that is or not beneficial that is. But for me, the world is full of choices. And we live in a free country. And for me, that's the real issue behind this program or this bill, this legislation, is to allow for you to pick what you want to do with your children and your education.
You're pro-choice?
On your education.
I want to give all of our panelists just a chance. I like to always end the evening with a little takeaway. So I'm going to let each of you, we're going to go down the line, we'll start with Frank, and what do you want these people to leave? These people are going to go out tomorrow, they're going to talk to their friends, they're going to talk to the water cooler at work. Do we have water coolers? I don't think so. Anyway, but They're going to talk. And what do you want them to share about what's going on with education and voucher systems and our tax dollars? Right?
Well, for me, first, I want to thank you for the opportunity to come and speak with you tonight. So one of the things that I tell people whenever I speak to a group, look, we're not going to agree on every subject. We might not agree on any subject. But one of the things that the people in the 47th District gave me the opportunity to serve as your senator, and I respect that. And I try to make sure that I'm always available for you. Said they make fun of me because I give my cell phone number out at 706-680-4466. Said for me, I tell people, I said, look, all of these things, and I'm not an educator, that's not my area of expertise, but all of these things that we deal with, we're part-time legislators. And I really try to make sure that there's two buttons on the front of my desk. Before I push one button or the other to move a bill forward or stop a bill, that I've tried to educate myself on those issues. You know, there's some of them that are so close to home, it's tough for me to deal with. Said this bill right here, I talked to several educators. Would I like to have changed the bill? Yes. Said one of the things that I remember, this bill was engrossed when it came out on the Senate floor, which we could not change. So for me, I appreciate the opportunity to be with you tonight. Said the guy that's going to decide that water cooler talk right now, from what I can see, is Blake Hall in the back. Said he's going to direct where that water cooler discussion goes. But thanks for having us out tonight.
Thanks, Bill.
I think, we kind of get sort of a little dug in sometimes on positions, and I love these type of events to hear different viewpoints. I've learned some things tonight, and I think we all look at the big picture sometimes. We are making great strides in education in the state of Georgia and in Clarke County. And I don't think we should have too much of a negative attitude about this. This is just an opportunity. I hope you've learned how finite it is, what a small number of kids is doing. It's just this little tug of war between parents being able to do what they think's best for their child, especially the ones that don't have the economic means to do it. Or are they going to do what Greg thinks is right for their child? And I'm saying that from teasing you because you are so proud of what you've done, and rightfully so, in Clarke County, that you're sort of puzzled. Why would any parent think they should go to a school that they don't have the same testing that we have here, et cetera, when there are parents that have different ideas? So that's the real
taxpayers pay for them to go to private schools and public schools.
Because they're paying the taxes.
No, but I don't want my tax money to go to a parochial school or private school. We have a separation of church and state. We used to.
Well, so you're on this team that says everybody ought to have to go to public schools.
No, we want the same testing private schools.
No, but if you want to
get tested how you guys get tested, Bill. That'd be fine.
Right, and I think that's something great that Greg has, and I'm not sure all the details of the testing in the bill, but
we are.
So that's
you need to
it's a
find out
moving
more
target.
about education. Do some research and listen to educators.
Hey, ma'am, that's why I'm here. Let me just tell you, that's why I'm here. I was invited to this, and I was told this was a nonpartisan event.
It is.
And the first thing I've seen is signs that you and your neighbor are showing, kiss your seats goodbye. Tell me that is nonpartisan. That's not, I mean, that is an adversarial beginning to the meeting.
The organization is nonpartisan. We show up have opinions.
Sorry to sound not like a little bit of a closing takeaway, so I'm going to move on to Greg.
Let me just end with a little bit of an anecdotal story. When I was a middle school counselor at Southern Middle School in Augusta, it was an inner city school at night.
Use the mic.
Yeah, just speak up, Greg.
Does it work?
Yeah.
Okay. Anyway, I was a counselor at Southern Middle School for 7 years, and we were on the hit list for 6 years. And finally, we got off of, we got AYP the 7th year. But anyway, we went through the George Bush era where George Bush took Title I funds and allotted a certain amount for parents to make these selections of how they wanted their kids to be remediated. That was the word that we used back then. All of a sudden, as a counselor, Frank, I got inundated with with companies seeking some of those dollars. Each parent had about $3,000, between $2,000 and $3,000, to provide some type of after-school programming for their child. And companies were coming out of the woodwork for that money. And they would come and hit me because they knew that I had access to the parents. So it was a situation of saying, hey, ABC tutoring company, we're going to do such and such and such to work with these kids. Or this particular company said, we're going to give every family a computer. Or, and they made all these great promises. At the end of the day, we had about, 150 to 200 students on this type of after-school programming that the money was being spent either here, there, no accountability whatsoever. Fortunately, it only lasted a few years. And we just continued on with our Title I money and they finally made AYP. The fact is that we can say freedom of choice, but the point is that if you ask me, Greg, we want you to select where you think the roads you need to, where those roads need to go, so that you can get to the grocery store, you can get to the shopping center. You design where those roads should be. Don't pick me to do that, because I can't do that. That's not my expertise, And so we do have professionals, we do have research, and let's listen to these folks first. That's all I'm saying.
Dr. Means.
Hopefully you can hear me. I want to thank Bill and Frank for being here. I hope I didn't sound offensive, but I did. I meant it. And I meant it because I lived through an experience in another state where public educators were not defensive. And we were told we were to get 2/3 funding and that we were to get more money for our public schools, and that should keep us quiet. And what I saw over years is this incremental growth of something that at the time in 1990, they said, oh, it's only a few kids. And it's grown. If I did not have an experience of watching this firsthand, maybe I wouldn't be as defensive. This is not good for children in Clarke County. This is not good for public education across the state of Georgia. What I would ask you to do as citizens is to watch the next phase of this. The next phase will be even more sophisticated. It will have more money behind it. It's not going away. You will see other voices and faces behind it, because while it's not a partisan issue, it is very political. It's extremely political. The movement has not stopped. I would ask Bill and Frank, let's keep talking, because I would prefer you to have conversations about fully funding our pre-kindergarten teachers who receive less pay than our kindergarten teachers. I would rather us have conversations about fully funding other components of our educational system. I would appreciate if there was a bill on the floor that said, here's extra money to school districts like Clarke County to have more social workers, counselors, and school psychologists to address poverty and bullying and all the different things that you laid out in terms of what you're trying to do with the voucher program. If you supported us with more funds instead of pivoting and sending those dollars elsewhere, I think there's an opportunity for middle ground. But candidly and respectfully, if there isn't that middle ground, then
then we have no option but to be defensive and to defend what our nation has said is the great equalizer, which is public education.
Thank you to all of our panelists for being here tonight. Thank you for our audience for coming out. I appreciate you all coming out to have this conversation, and also thank our friends at CNA for making this space available. And they probably are looking to go home soon. So we're going to break this up, but feel free to chit chat among yourselves, and we'll